Hey everyone, Gary here from Echidna Sewing, and today we're going to take a bit of a deeper look at the VMA V9000S high-speed straight stitch industrial sewing machine. So the V9000S is one of our most popular models, and it's a bit more advanced than the other main model we have, which is the VA2S, and we've done some videos on those. And in fact, I'd encourage you to watch those videos, and you'll see them down in the link below. One of them in particular is the basic operation of the machine, how to thread it, how to wind bobbins, all those rudimentary things that you need to know. I'm not going to go through those again on this video. This video is about digging into the really cool features that this machine adds. So please use them in tandem, use that other video as a bit of a reference as well. The V9000S is our most popular model, and you'll see with good reason, because the automation does make sewing a whole lot easier. Things like auto foot lifting, auto back tacking are just a couple of the key features. So let's have a close look at how this all works. First thing I'll do is actually outline the differences between this and the A2S. The first one you'll see is that there is no reverse lever just here. So reversing is a push button reverse right here at your fingertips just near the needle. We'll show that in practice in a moment. The other key physical difference is that it's got two little additional components here. This is a little felt pad for putting silicone oil on, and you can use that if you've got difficult threads or threads you're doing a job that needs a little bit more silicone lubricant on the thread. You can actually just add silicone to that little felt pad. And one of the other key features is this little gadget here, which is a clamping system, and when you see that in practice you'll understand just how good that is and why you would pay a little bit extra to have it. And that helps eliminate thread tails and makes for better stitching in general. Other than that, the machines are pretty much identical. So the A2S looks the same, just doesn't have as many features on the control panel. Now there is one thing I will just quickly go through on the threading, actually thinking about it. And that is the clamping system and the little silicone pad there. So I'm going to pull the thread back out of the machine. I'll just get my scissors and we'll rethread it from this point. Of course, I've got my thread coming down from the spool through the eyelets here. And I'll just pull this thread out, lift the foot, take that thread through there. Now, the threading is simple. It's just a matter of following the process, and it's pretty much the same as the other model I mentioned. And we go into here, so I'm going through the pre-tensioning device, making sure it's between the little discs there. Now make sure the presser foot is up, and that opens up the tension down here, and we make sure we hook the thread into the tension facility, catch the check spring under the check spring bar there, and then into the take-up lever, and they're not slotted because we don't want the threads coming out. You don't need to engage into this guide here. It doesn't matter if you do, but it's not 100% necessary. We can use that to adjust for heavy threads. It gives you a slightly different tension if needed. But now, in order to get into the little felt pad in behind there, it is just a matter of tucking the thread in behind the felt pad. Very, very simple. I'm going to pull a bit more thread through. Remember, when your presser foot is up, the tension system is open, and that makes it easier to pull the thread through. Now, this is the clamping system, and all it is a case of just popping the thread in behind the clamp. And as long as you've got it in that, it's all good to go. And then into the little pigtail there. Make sure that you do thread the thread through the little hole on the needle bar, like so, and then through the side of the needle. Now these thread from left to right, so you've got to remember that. Not front to back, left to right every time. And so that means when you're changing the needle, you make sure that the scarf of the needle is on the right-hand side. And I think I explained that pretty well in the other video as well, the A2S machine. But that's pretty standard for most industrial standard straight stitch machines, scarf of the needle on the right, long groove on the left, and you thread from left to right. Now, let's take a good look at this control panel. And I think the first thing we might do is just go through the control panel and what the different functions do and show you that practically in a sewing sense how that all works. And I guess with the LCD screen there and all these little buttons here can be a little bit daunting sometimes. People do look at things and go, oh my goodness, will I ever know that? And I will point out that the machine does come with a little cheat sheet of all the different buttons, and it explains what they do and all the parameter settings. There's so much on here, you're never going to use it all, so don't panic. You just don't need to know all that stuff. But what you do want to know is what all these simple buttons do on the screen. And perhaps the first thing we'll do is get a bit of fabric and just run a straight stitch down the machine. So when you switch the machine on, it will default to a standard straight stitch, and we'll have the trimming function turned on. So these are what we call an underbed thread trimmer, and you'll notice that's represented by a little pair of scissors. And that means we can just do a straight stitch and trim the thread at the end of the seam. So I will lift my foot. Now you do obviously have a knee lever here, which is a mechanical lift for your presser foot, but this model also has an automatic presser foot function or lifting function. So when I heel back on my foot control, it will lift the foot for me. Now that is a really cool feature, and that also gives us auto pivoting during our sewing cycle, and just really makes sewing a whole lot more enjoyable. So I'm heeling back on my foot pedal, and that lifts the foot. I can now lower my foot down, and if I start stitching now, I'm doing a straight stitch, and when I get to the end of the seam, I just simply heel back on my pedal and it trims the thread. Nice and neat, perfect trim there. And I can pop my fabric back under the foot, do another seam. And the first thing you're going to see here is I've got some thread tails, which is completely normal. You'd expect to see thread tails when you start stitching with on a new seam, particularly if you have the thread through the back of the foot, as that is now. And we'll do one more, and you'll see that I'm going to get another thread tail. So I now have 3 thread tails. Now in a clothing factory, we don't want that because that's got to be trimmed at the end of a seam. And that's what this little clamp system does right here. It's called a thread clamping system. And I'm going to now turn that on. So you'll see here we have a symbol right there on screen that represents the thread clamp system. And if I hold that button down,
electronic thread clamp on.
Notice it talks to you. So this machine actually will tell you when you make changes. Now that can be quite handy because you'll know if you've made a mistake or you've chosen the right function. But I have now turned the automatic thread clamping on, and you'll see the symbol is now highlighted on the screen. Now let's see what that actually does. If I start another seam right beside the one I just did, come down, no tail. Even though the thread was still sitting under the foot, the tail is not exposed on the top of the fabric. It has been dragged in and sewn in underneath the fabric. Now, for most apparel manufacturing or garment construction, that's exactly what we want. We don't want thread tails on top of the fabric. So that's a great feature and one that I just simply love and is an essential thing in clothing production. So that's the thread tail system there. Now you'll see that button also shares the same, that button also has the scissor function on it. So I can turn the trimming off if I want. If I simply hit that button once, the trimming turns off, hit it again, and it will come back on. So all of a sudden you've got one of these machines and it stopped trimming, chances are you've hit that button and turned the trimmer off. Let's move across a little further here. We have the option of having the needle stop in the up position or the down position. So if I just now go and sew along and stop in the middle of a seam, you'll notice the needle has stopped in the up position. If I want the needle to stop in the down position, I just hit that button once, and the needle position has now shown it's stopping in the lower position. So if I do a couple more stitches, the needle stops down. And that would allow me to lift my foot, pivot around, and change direction. And I can do that again. That's manually using the knee lever. However, I also have the option to turn on an auto foot lift function. and that is this little guy right here. So if I just push that button once,
Midway presser foot lifting on.
and if you heard that, it said midway presser foot lifting on. That means in the middle of a seam, we've now told the machine to lift the foot. And if you combine that with the needle down function, when I get to and I stop, the foot will automatically lift for me, and now I can come back and automatically pivot, which is a great feature. So that is a really handy thing for quilters, well, for any function really, automatically lifting the foot. After 10 seconds it will drop down too, by the way, and to lift the foot up again I can just heel back on my pedal a little bit. If I heel all the way, it will actually trim the thread. I can also adjust the height of that presser foot setting, the midway presser foot setting, and we can do that here. There's a little symbol that shows a presser foot with 2 arrows up and down, and I can go from 0 right up to 10.
Free sewing.
So I've taken that up to 10, and watch what happens now. The foot lifts much higher than it was. So if you're doing bulky work or a big thick quilt, that could be handy. If I wanted to go down to a lower number, say 6,
free sewing.
it's now lifting only 6 mil high. So that's kind of a really nice feature, and one that's very easily accessible, and you'll use that all the time. Now, of course, if I get to the end of the seam and I'm finished sewing, just heel all the way back on my pedal and it will cut the thread for me because the trimmers come into play. So your foot pedal has both a halfway position, and that will lift the presser foot. So when you heel back, it will lift the presser foot. When you heel back all the way, it will also do a trim. And then we can also turn on another function back here at the presser foot lift button. If I hit that again,
Post thread trimming presser foot lifting
it's
on.
now turned on post thread trimming presser foot lifting. That means after you've done a trim, and the foot will lift and stay up for you. If I hit that button again,
Midway post thread trimming presser foot lifting on.
it's now turned on both the midway presser foot lifting and the post trimming presser foot lifting. That means it's going to stitch along, stop, the foot will lift, let you pivot, and then when we get to the end of whatever we're doing, trim, and the foot will lift again for you, and then remain up for 10 seconds to allow you to move the fabric. Now, of course, automatic foot lifting is just one of the best features on any machine, and particularly for quilters and keen sewers who are lifting the foot quite frequently. So stopping with the needle down and the foot lifting means you've got perfect pivoting, and very easy to do. Now, another key feature on these machines is the automatic back tacking function. Now, we all know we like to back tack and get a reinforced start at the seam and the end of a seam, and typically the way you would do that on a standard industrial machine is you'd have a little lever here for doing your reverse. In this case, it's an electronic machine, so we don't have that manual lever. Our reverse button is just here. And so if I was to sew a few stitches and hit that button, I'll try and keep my fingers out the way, it goes back. And when I get to the end of the seam, if I hit that, I can back tack that way, heel back on the pedal, and it trims the thread, and you'll see I've got a start reinforcement stitch there, and a back tacking and a back tacking down here to reinforce the seam. But I can do it automatically because I have these magic buttons here. And if I hit that button twice, it's going to be a double front tack. So it's the very front of the seam, the start of the seam is going to do a double back tack. And if I do it at the end as well,
Rear double tacking.
I've now got rear or the end of the seam double tacking. And what that essentially means is if I start stitching there, get to the end of my seam and heel back, it's automatically done my back tack at the start and the finish of the seam. I don't have to think about it. Now, the other good thing about this is they're all controllable. The back tacking at the moment is set to go 3 forward, 3 back, 3 forward, 3 back. And you can control all those settings. If you wanted a longer back tack, I can simply,
Move cursor,
using
right
my
word.
cursor move button, and here's the thing with the voice control, it actually tells you what you're doing. You'll see the 3 is now flashing. That means I can increase or
Numeral
decrease
plus.
the number of stitches at that first point. And that's
Numeral minus.
generally speaking, you're not going to need to adjust those because the default settings are pretty good, but you can, and that's a really nice option to have. Now, if you've made any changes to these stitch numbers here, you just hit the S button and that will save it, and it'll stay there until you change it again. Now, another key important feature on any sewing machine is to be able to adjust the stitch length. Now, of course, these are just straight stitch machines, so you really only have one control. On the VA2S, we have a manual dial here, a mechanical dial for changing the stitch length. On this one, we have an electronic function, and that's this function right here, plus and minus with a millimeter symbol there, and that denotes the stitch length. The stitch length is currently 3.5 millimeters, and if I increase
numeral plus.
it will tell you your numeral plus means you've increased the number there, and I'll go to 4.
Numeral plus.
And I can go right up to 5 millimeters. So that's a pretty good long stitch length and a very reliable stitch length at that. So if I was to now start stitching, I've still got my back tacking functions on, so it will now do a back tack at the start of the seam, get to the end, heel back, and it's done a back tack start and finish, and now it's a 4 millimeter stitch. If I want to turn off the back tacking, I can just touch this button until the symbol disappears. So you just click that button,
Front off.
and it says off, so I have no back tacking on at all now. I've still got a 4 mil stitch length. I'm kind of happy to leave it there. And that's as easy as it is to change the stitch length. It really is quite simple. And there's not many other real settings that you need to get too involved in. If your basic sewing is just having some back tacking, having your trimming working, your presser foot lifting, and adjust your stitch length, you're up and running. Now, these machines do run very fast, of course, and that's another setting that people will often want to use. Right now, if I want to change the speed on the machine, or the maximum speed on the machine, because you can control the speed at your leisure with your foot control, but I can set a maximum speed, and right now,
Speed up.
this is at the maximum speed of 3,700 stitches per minute. That's fast, and that's probably too fast for most folks at home. And if I wanted to sort of limit that to only 2,000 stitches, I would just take that down there to 2,000 and hit the save button. And that's now going to be set at 2,000 stitches. That means no matter how hard I push the pedal, it won't go any faster than 2,000 stitches per minute, which is a nice speed to run at. But if you can handle it, hey, you can go faster if you wish. The machine will definitely handle it. Now this button here is the soft start button, and if we hold that down,
Soft start on.
that means the first couple of stitches every time you sew will be a little bit slower than the normal speed. Just makes for a little bit easier pickup of the start of the seam. Now another thing that's often a real handy facility is being able to inch forward one stitch at a time without relying on pushing your pedal. And this machine has two options for that. So let's say we're sewing down a seam and we need one more stitch. I've got two buttons just here. Oh, well, there's three. That's the reverse button, so we've talked about that for doing reverse stitching. This one here will actually, and I'll try and keep my fingers out the way, when I hit that button, it will give me one more stitch. If I hit it really, really quick, it will just give me a needle up or down. But if I hold it down a little bit longer, it will give me one more stitch. Which is great because sometimes you get to a point and you just need one more stitch, so that's a really accurate way to do it. Sometimes you need half a stitch. You don't need a full stitch length. And so you have this secondary option at the top here, the top button, which will give us half a normal stitch. And that's great if you're a bag maker or you're doing intricate work where you just need to get to a pivot point or a corner where you just don't want to overshoot it. It's a great, great feature, and one that comes with being an electronic machine. So I think that's one you'll want to use quite frequently. So that's kind of a run through on the basic commands there. There's two more commands that I'm going to talk about just quickly, and I'm going to get a new piece of fabric to do this. So let me just grab another piece here. And the first one is what we call a multi-section sewing. Now, if you do a lot of repeat work, you might be putting labels on, for instance, and you need to create a box or a square around a label that you're going to do, 100 of or something like that. Who knows? I've got an option here called, I'll go hit
One
the button.
segment sewing.
It's a one segment sewing. Now what that means, it's programmed in to do one segment of a predetermined number of stitches. And in this case, it's 10 stitches. So if I was to stitch down here, it's done a back tack start and finish, and it's got 10 stitches between start to finish there. If I do that again, it'll do exactly the same thing. I still got my foot on the pedal, so I haven't taken it off, but it's programmed to only do that run of stitches there. And that's exactly the same stitch for the two seams I've just done there. Now I can go in and program that again using these arrows. I can actually say, all right, I want to do 20 stitches as my segment. So that's fully programmable. I'm going to go back to, in fact, we'll just hit the save button there and get out of that. So that's a single section. If I wanted to do multi-section, I can hit that button again.
Multi-segment sewing.
And now it's going to do a multi-segment function. So the first section or the first segment is going to sew 12 stitches. And if we now hit that button,
Cursor, rightward.
So I've now highlighted first sector.
Numeral plus.
The second sector is going to do 12 stitches. The
Numeral
third sector
plus.
is also 12 stitches.
Numeral plus.
And the fourth sector is also 12 stitches. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to position number one. I was just showing you how that actually worked. And we're going to sew a square using this multi-section function. So we'll just hit the save button there. Okay, so I put a new piece of fabric on, and now I'm going to do a multi-section sewing. So this is like if you're sewing on a badge or a label or something, and you're repeating that process, the same process a lot of times, commonly done in the clothing industry. I'm on section one in the multi-section sewing, and so the first thing it's going to do is sew 12 stitches down and stop. My foot's still down, so I'm going to lift my foot, or the foot has lifted automatically, turn around, and now I'm going to do the next section. I'm going to try and keep this nice and straight, and it stops automatically after 12 stitches. I don't have to think about it. And now I'm going to come down and do the next section, keep it straight as I can, stops automatically, and turn around, and we're going to come back down now to the end, and if I've sewn straight, it's automatically trimmed at the end. Oh, I'm not a very straight sewer. You'll do a better job than me. But that's if I kept that straight, that would have lined up perfectly on the little point at that last corner. So, but each of those sections was 12 stitches. So that's fully programmable. There's lots of programming in this, but again, in the main, most people will probably just use the basic functionality that you see on the screen. And the other final little function, or one of the final little functions that I wanted to point out, is a thing they call W sewing, and it's like a bar tacking. And if we go in and choose this function, that's it on this button right here.
W sewing.
It's now turned on what we call W sewing. Now this is a very similar to what we call a bar tack in the clothing industry. So when you look at apparel that's manufactured, where you get belt loops and you need seam strengthening or anything to secure the end of a seam, they use a bar tack. And typically it's a standalone machine, and that's all it does is bar tacks. This is kind of a simulated bar tack. And what it does is it does a series of backwards and forwards back tacking, and it's the same every time. And you can program this to be whatever you want it to be. And you can use that at the end of a garment to reinforce all the seams or all the stress points where you're likely to see seams that will fall apart or potentially unravel. And the tail is sewn in underneath the fabric, so you've got no trimming to do on the top of the fabric. And you can adjust that. This is currently set for 4, 4, 4, 4. That means it's going to go 4 stitches forward, 4 stitches back, forward, back, and then stop and trim the thread and lift the foot for you. And again, if you watch what I'm doing here, I'm not taking my foot off the pedal, and it's completely done the job in one hit. My foot is still hard down on the pedal. If I let go and hit it again, it will do it again. And honestly, that's a great feature for tidying up at the end of a garment construction or any construction that you're doing where you do want to reinforce everything. The last thing I'm going to quickly point out on this machine is it has some pretty cool pattern functions as well. And these are all pre-programmed in, so if we hit the pattern button, Oops, I'll get out of the W sewing first, so I just got to touch that button.
Free sewing.
We're back to free sewing. Free sewing means it's just standard straight stitch. And if I hit the pattern button, you'll see it says D1. That's pattern number 1, design number 1. And if I start stitching, you'll see that's creating quite a really, really nice little, almost like a pretend sashiko stitch, to be honest. It's triple stitching with a single stitch between each segment, and it's kind of a cool feature. So you can use that as a strong decorative kind of seam stitch if you wish, or a decorative stitch. Now there's also 8 more patterns in there, and to choose that I just simply go to my my stitch length adjustment. When we're in this mode, it will actually allow me to choose
plus.
design 2. So let's have a look at what that does. And that's just a slightly different pattern with a longer set of stitches between each of the triple stitched little, kind of like a little bean stitch or a rice stitch. And we'll go and have a look at pattern number 3.
Numeral plus.
And again, a very different stitch. So there's 9 in total. You know, that you might find them handy, and they can be programmed as well and changed. But in general, I think the first 3 are the ones that you'll probably have some fun with if you choose to use those features. So look, all in all, this is just great value when you look at the price for the machine on our website. The ease of use, moreover, it's the amazing sewability. Once you go to an industrial machine and you start using one of these guys, it's hard to go back to a normal sewing machine, a domestic sewing machine, because they're just so comfortable and easy to use. And they stitch through anything. As long as you have the right needle size for the job you're doing. And of course, if you are doing something that involves, you know, perhaps bag making or some heavier work, these machines will handle heavier thread far, far, far better than your domestic machine. So, and we have a great range of heavy duty threads that will support this and all the needles that you would need to do that. As always, if you want to know more information about anything we have, please contact us, talk to us directly, or email us, or however you want to get in touch with us, and we'll happily guide you through the process of choosing a machine that's right for you. With the videos we've done on how to assemble these machines, they're pretty simple. You can do it yourself, but if you live somewhere locally near us, we can always put it together and get it to you fully set up, ready to go, which is fantastic. But otherwise, have a think about an industrial machine if you're doing enough work, because it is just a fantastic experience. Hope that video is helpful to you. I think I've covered most of everything I needed to do. And until next time, happy sewing.